Well, hello everyone, this is Basil the Ortho Biker, and welcome back to the channel. So we are out here today because I'm going through the fourth and final auto-tuning session on my Sportster, and I thought I would take you all with me. Before we get started, if this is your first time joining the channel, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you get notifications for any videos I may put out in the future, just like this one. So if you haven't seen my earlier video, I put a 2-in-1 stainless steel Comp S exhaust from Two Brothers Racing onto the motorcycle roughly a week ago. And I've been trying to get in some auto-tuning sessions when I have time, using the Powervision from Dyno Jet to get it, finally tuned in and dialed in. But before we get started here, let's go ahead and jump back to the garage and show you how I get it set up. Alright everyone, I'm in the garage with the bike. I've got the Powervision PV2 mounted to the motorcycle, kind of ad hoc solution using a RAM mount. They do make specific mounts for the Powervision to mount to your motorcycle on a more permanent basis, or a better fixture than this, but this for me, for what I'm using it for, works because I don't really have any plans to permanently mount it to the bike. So first thing you do is you turn the motorcycle on, and it takes a moment for the Powervision to power up, so I'll wait for it to do that. Now, just to be clear, I've already done 3 auto-tuning sessions on the bike, so I'm going to be doing this is going to be the last auto-tuning session I do. What people usually recommend is to run through 2 tanks of gas. I've also heard others suggest doing 4 auto-tuning sessions, just kind of overlapping and laying one on top of the other. I kind of split the difference between the two. I do maybe a 40 or 50 mile ride, which roughly equates to 2 tanks of gas almost. So I do 4 40 or 50 mile rides, and I layer those tuning sessions on top of one another to dial in the tune for the Sportster as much as I can. So the way you get that set up to start is you have the home screen. You go to Program Vehicle and you accept. Then you go to Auto Tune. What you'll want to do is hit the button Enable Auto Tune. Now these are a list of bunch of different tunes I've had under. These are from back when the bike was in the early stages. These are the tunes I've been working with. I started with a default map. It was a 2-in-1 bass tune, I think for a Roland Sands tracker, and just a generic aftermarket exhaust. That was the only 883 map on the Dyno Jet website that had a 2-in-1 exhaust. So that was the starting point I initially started working from. And I've already saved a few maps since then, or auto tuning sessions rather. So what I usually do is I start with the bass tune. I save the first auto tuning session, then I'll save the second auto tuning session, and I'll stagger back and forth until I reach the final tune that I want to reach, and I'll usually put that final tune into the first slot when I'm done. But the last tuning session was the Auto Tune Results 17, so we're going to select that one as what we're tuning from, and I have narrowband O2 sensors. Don't use these last 2 unless you have the target tune, or the there's other kits from Dyno Jet that you can buy for the Powervision, so you need one of those kits to use these last 2. So we will use the basic narrowband sensors, basically telling you it's going to modify the tune on your ECU. Takes a minute. Little caveat is I have had this say where it failed sometimes. Just do it again and it'll go through, or if it keeps failing, turn the bike off for 10 seconds, turn it back on, and that usually resolves the issue. So don't freak out if you ever get a fail message on the Powervision. Alright, so now it's telling you to turn off the bike for 10 seconds, so I hit OK, then I turn off the bike.
A few moments later.
Alright, so I usually count to about 15, whatever, and turn it back on. Alright, so the Powervision is powered up. We go back to Program Vehicle, Accept, and Auto Tune, and you'll see the Enable Auto Tune is grayed out and the Disable Auto Tune is highlighted. So that tells you your bike is in auto tuning mode. Now, when you go for the ride, you'll want to go into the data log screen. And this is where the information that your bike is recording is going to show up. And we'll go ahead and get that started and show you what that looks like. All right, so now that we have the auto tuner set up, we'll go ahead and start the bike. Stop rolling backwards. And I'm not even sure you guys can see this in this light. I'll do the best I can to block the sun out. It should get brighter here in just a moment. There it goes. So you want to go to Program Vehicle, and go ahead and accept, hit Auto Tune, and then Data Log. So what normally happens is you won't have any information recorded here because the bike has to get to a normal operating temperature for any information to be recorded. As you can see, there's a little bit of data here already from the short ride down the road to this parking lot. So one of the first things I usually do is I try to, let's see if I can do this, and okay, there we go. So one of the first things I try to do is to kind of cycle through this corner block, just fill in some of the this stuff here by revving the motorcycle at idle. That's just something I do. I don't know if it's necessary, but you kind of miss a lot of those blocks when you just tune it riding around and going at full throttle or whatever. So I try to, if you have a nice quiet parking lot like this one, you probably sit here for a good 5-10 minutes and just kind of get all those blocks filled in and tuned in right. And then you can hold the exhaust in certain blocks and get them filled in. And these are blocks you may just miss through normal riding. So I make sure to fill in as much of that upper left-hand corner as I can with just revving the motorcycle while it's sitting still. Now the green blocks mean you don't have enough data. The orange ones are leaning towards the red. It's when the blocks are finally and fully red on the auto tuner that it has enough data to you know, add more information to the existing map. So we're shooting for red. That was something I didn't know when I first started doing the auto tuner a couple of years ago. I thought green was good, but no, red is good. It's the Fuel Pack 3 where green is good on the auto tuner. Now one thing I want to point out is your bike will run like garbage while it's an auto tune. This thing idles super weird when you turn it on. It'll like rev up to like 2,000 RPMs, back down to 15. It'll rev up, it revs up and down very weirdly as it's warming up. Also, it's reached normal idle temperature, but it's still running like crap. And you'll notice when you ride the bike that the bike kind of runs worse than it should. And the reason for this is because when you have an auto tune mode like this, it turns off some of the default tables, like the changes made when you accelerate, changes made when you're decelerating to avoid decel pop, and a couple other factors and parameters it turns off on the motorcycle. But that's neither here nor there, so let's go ahead and get started with the auto tuning session. This is actually the parking lot I learned to ride a motorcycle on. I had a Honda Rebel 300 was my first bike, and I probably spent 50 to 100 miles in this parking lot just practicing slow maneuvers. Being in it again makes me think back and say, man, I've come a long way. Now, since most of us are not tuning our motorcycle for racing, the key I have found, and because I've done this several times, the key I have found is smooth throttle movements, because it allows the hello bird, it allows the sensor to stay in one box a little bit longer than if you were just doing full throttle right away. Because the goal is you want to fill as much of this out as possible. So yes, I do at some points hit full throttle, just because, you know, bike's got to know what it's doing when you open it up. The other thing I would recommend is kind of develop a route that fits your auto tuning session. You know, normal riding, different conditions, speeds, uphill, downhill, things like that, so you can nail all the RPMs in the motorcycle. Also, if you're going to do a full throttle at all on the motorcycle, make sure it's on a road that you're not going to get arrested and it's fairly empty, so you're not going to get hit by or you're not going to hit somebody, or somebody's going to hit you. I'm probably going to do a couple full throttle pulls. And honestly, the only reason why I did that one is because that Mustang came out of nowhere, so I figured I'd get out of his way. So ideally, you want to run through the entire rev range on the motorcycle, and you want to run through as much of the throttle position as possible on the motorcycle as well. So this is one of the roads I ride often. So I usually include this on my tune because I ride it a lot. It's fun. I like it. But I'll usually slowly increase the speed and try to get as close to full throttle as I can, and then slowly decrease the speed, running through the rev range up and down slowly, and getting all those different throttle position pegs marked on the auto-tune map. Sometimes it's a good idea to go in the highest gear, drop as slow as you can, get into the lowest RPMs you can without lugging out the bike, which is another reason why I pulled ahead of that car, because I needed some room between us and them. Try and get it down to 2,000-ish, and then slowly pull it out of that hole. Because you want your bike to learn as much of the map as possible with whatever change you made, whether it's a new air cleaner or put it on the road. No, don't look at the roadkill. Or a new exhaust, or any changes you make to the bike that affect the overall fuel-air mixture. So as you can see right now, a large portion of that map has already got hits and marks on it just from the little bit we've done. So like I said, the goal is to fill as much of that out as possible on the motorcycle when you go through your auto tuning run. Now, I normally do this road on the 4th gear. And full throttle in 5th gear. Slowly slow it down. Trail braking. And slow it down. Okay, so that's all been in 5th gear. I'm going to drop to 4th. Drop it down slowly. We'll drop down to 3rd. Why not? Now, 3rd, I found out, is a hooligan gear on this bike. I love 3rd gear. Pulls really hard. gear, whatever reason, has learned to pull really hard on this exhaust. And that was the end of the curvy parts of this little auto-tuning session. So now we get into the slower portions where you want to stay in the lower gears and try to work through the lower RPMs. See, look at that. We covered quite a bit of that map. And I think I've done this 3 times already. I imagine the tuning's going to be fairly good once we get done with this auto-tuning session. By keeping my throttle movement slow and intentional, I think I may have ironed out much of the power loss that may have occurred in the first, like I said, the first 3,000 RPMs of this motorcycle. There's probably still a little bit of a loss, maybe by nature of the current setup, I don't know. Like I said, I'll get a dyno at some point to see what it actually looks like. But the name of the game is smooth and intentional. You want to cover as many of those boxes as possible. I know a lot of people tune their bike, they go, wah, and just open it up, and that's not really helpful to everyday riding. I have not looked at my fuel level today. Do that real quick. I'm good. And by fuel level, how many miles are on this trip? Because I don't have a fuel gauge. Oh, hey, I could have just pulled right in front of you by accident because you don't pay attention. Yellville's busy today. Go. Alright, let's try that again. Farmer's market. So on slower stretches like this, I recommend, you know, kind of keeping it in the lowest RPMs possible. Like normally I do this road on like 2nd gear. I'm in 3rd and I've got it at, you know, 2,200 RPMs doing the speed limit. I might try to lug it down to 3,000 or 2,000. And when I say lug, I'm not actually lugging out the bike. I'm just dropping the RPMs as low as I can get before it feels like it's lugging. The nice thing about this exhaust is the bike doesn't seem to lug nearly as easily as it would before with the slip-on. So I kind of like that. And oddly enough, that's made slow maneuvers, moving the bike around at slow speeds, a lot easier, a lot smoother, more fluid. Okay, that's in the 3rd gear. Yeah, don't be afraid to rev the bike out. I mean, okay, some bikes not made forever. This is a Sportster. I think some people are afraid to rev a Sportster out because it's a Harley and it's a cruiser. But these bikes are actually surprisingly rev happy, even though they only have a rev ceiling of what, 6,500, maybe 6,000, maybe less. I don't really know. I've only hit redline a couple times. It was by accident. But the power curve ends at like 3,750, 4,500, somewhere in there. So I usually tend not to go higher than that because you've kind of hit the point of diminishing returns, so there's no point. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward and finish this tuning session, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to show you how to load that tune onto the bike once it's done. Alright, so we are back in the garage. Now I had intended to pull into the gas station, fill up the bike, and show you how to load your auto tuning session into the bike and then go for a short ride and wrap up the video, but my GoPro had other things in mind. So when I finally pulled over to fill up the tank, I found the GoPro was in a shutdown loop, and when I finally pulled the battery to release it from that, plug the battery back in and turn it on, I only had 1% battery, so I did not have enough to finish the video on that charge, which otherwise I would have. But that's not the first glitch or issue I've had with the GoPro. I'm kind of wishing I got an Insta360, but that's a different subject entirely. So once you're done with your auto tuning session, go ahead and turn the bike on into the accessory mode. All right, once the GoPro has loaded, you'll want to go to Program Vehicle, Accept, go to Auto Tune, and I'll just show you the data log where we ended up with. So the finalized data log has quite a bit of hits in the RPM range and throttle position I use the most. Like I said, you want to fill up as much of this as you can. Many of the auto tuning maps I've seen look very similar to this. Some have fewer on this corner, some have fewer on this corner. It just depends on the bike and how you ride it. So what we're going to do from here, we're going to go back to the previous screen. We're going to export learned. And so this will apply all learned values to the tune to save it to the custom tune slot. And what I do is I usually save it over the previous auto tuning session. So in this case, that'll be 15. Nope, wrong one. 15. And basically saying it's just going to overwrite what was in the previous slot. We're going to accept OK. Have it saved to that slot. All right, so now that the auto tuning session has been saved to that chosen slot, we want to go ahead and load that auto tune into the ECU and tune the bike. So we're going to select the session we just saved, which you can see it's increased in number, and go and select that. It just tells you the information. Basically all this is carried over from the base tune that I selected, and this was the base tune that was selected from the Dyno Jet website. So we're going to continue. Okay, so we do want to flash this tune to the bike. It's preparing the ECU. Now this is the step where I mentioned earlier, sometimes you get an error. I don't think we'll get one this time. Sometimes you don't power off the bike enough, or you do something in the middle of the tuning or flash process that may throw an error. Just turn it off, turn it back on. You should be good to go. Now this is where I read the forums on and found most of the consensus I've seen, and I think there was an official reply on Dyno Jet somewhere. We do want to reset the trim values, so click yes on that.
A few moments later.
All right, so we will turn the bike off. And that is pretty much it. So this bike has been auto-tuned a total of 4 sessions, equaling roughly 2 tanks of gas. I would say about 200 miles-ish total between the 4 sessions. You can do more, you can do less, it's really up to you. But the bike is now tuned, so when I do go out for a ride next time or later today, just depends on what the weather's doing. I can never tell if it's going to rain or not. The bike should run a lot better, a lot smoother, and hopefully have a better throttle response. What I'm going to do before I go on that ride is I need to do some adjustments to my throttle. But that is the auto tuning session on my Sportster, and it should apply in general to most motorcycles across the board. So if you do have any questions, please leave questions in the comments below, or you have any comments, just go ahead and leave those below as well. I try to respond to all questions and comments. So we will go ahead and wrap up the video here. So keep the 2 wheels on the ground, the shiny side up, ride safe, and see you in the next one.